teachers of Reddit, what are your stories of, oh god, this child is a sociopath? I have a million stories of students who say borderline sociopathic stuff, but the worst thing I've ever heard to date was, I can't be trusted with knives. My mommy hides all knives in the house from me because I've tried to stab everything and everyone. I know if I stab an animal or a person too much they might die. This would mean I'd go to jail and I don't think I could make it in jail. So I want to find a dead body and stab it over and over again. This way I know I won't get in too much trouble cause the person was already dead. That is a psychopath and it's good they've drilled that logic into him/her because that's the only logic a psychopath will understand. Creepy F though. Had a high school freshman who was a very boisterous kid and youthful for his age. One day he was being disruptive and acting up, so I asked him to step out of the room with me while my co-teacher continued the lesson. I calmly explained to him why I had taken him out, why his behavior was disruptive, and asked him to be more mindful in the future. He seemed attentive to me, and to understand where I was coming from. Then, just as I was about to go back in with him, he says to me, "Okay, I'm gonna start crying so everyone thinks you yelled at me." I immediately put the brakes on. I asked him why he wanted to do that, why he felt it was okay to lie like that, and why he wanted to make me seem like a bad person when I had been very polite and thought we had had a good interaction. He didn't have any good answers with me, but we had already spent enough time out of class. I got him to agree to go in quietly and we went on with the lesson. Needless to say, it was a sign of things to come. He turned out to be a gossiping, backstabbing little social monster. The more mature kids learned to keep their distance from him, and he cultivated friendships with other kids who enjoyed his acting out and emulated it. We finished out the year on reasonable terms, but as he went on to other teachers with different classroom styles, his behavior worsened and derailed many classes. A 5-year-old kindergarten student started crying. He didn't want to go in the classroom. His mother told him he had to go anyways. The kid stopped crying, took off his belt, and started whipping his mother. As a teacher, it was the first time I was completely speechless. This feels like learned behavior. This child has watched someone else or been hit with a belt and thinks it's a way to get what you want. More worried about where the child learned this than the child right now. This one happened just the other day and, obviously, I'm going to be anonymous about it to protect the child's identity. Let's call her Abby. So, I'm driving a minibus of students home from a basketball practice when suddenly Abby starts screaming, "Did that have peanuts in it? I'm allergic to peanuts." She begins hyperventilating and crying and actually makes me pull over so she can get off the bus and throw up. We're about 15 minutes from the school and I'm literally having a panic attack. So, I call the principal and ask what should I do? Do we have an EpiPen on hand at the school? She seems confused and puts Abby's grandmother on, who tells me she wasn't aware her granddaughter, who is claiming she can barely breathe, had any allergies. When we got back to the school I was about ready to faint and the principal brings out her registration paperwork to show me. No listed allergies. She isn't allergic to anything. It was all an act. The hyperventilating, the crying, even the throwing up, was all for attention. First grader threatened to cut my head off with a pair of scissors because I told her she couldn't put a mutilated dead body on her banner. Edit. For the people saying in the comments that that kind of talk is normal for a first grader, by threatening to cut my head off with a pair of scissors I mean she came at me with a pair of scissors while saying in a completely serious voice that she was going to cut my head off with a pair of scissors she was brandishing. So I am not entirely sure if this is sociopath or psychopath, but I had a child that was creepily into my pregnancy for the first 7 months. He wanted to name her, talk to my belly, etc. Then one day it clicked that I would leave and he got really close to me and whispered, "When you come out, I'm going to kill you with a hammer. I hate you." I was shocked, so I took him with me to the office. The LSSP asked why he said that. He replied that, "It will take her away. I want it to die so she stays here." He was on a lot of medication for his incredibly violent tendencies. He had tried to kill his sister before by pushing her in front of a bus. His mother kept him locked in his room at night because she had found him standing over her with a knife. His sister annoyed him so he killed her kitten in front of her. Complete and utter lack of remorse. Just didn't see animals as any different from toys. Violence towards animals during childhood is very common in serial killers. My dad is a lay pastor, and when I was a kid I would often have to accompany him on visits to other congregation members' homes. One time I was brought along, and the adults put me with the oldest daughter of the house to play until they were done. She was pretty nice, and immediately took me to her room to show me her pet hamster. When we got into the room, she closed the door behind us and put some pillows down in front of it so that it would be harder to get open. She told me it was because she hated her little brother. He would run in to scare her, or hit her, or worse. She then told me that this hamster was her second, because her brother had ripped the legs off of her last one while she watched. I was maybe about 6, and I remember being effing terrified. I worked with a student who would fit this description. The stories of the things he did are extensive. One example is that he got up from his seat to throw something away. On his way back, he walked up behind a student who was distracted working on his assignment. Out of the blue, he pushed the working student's head forward and into the desk. He gave him a bloody nose. There had been no previous altercation or source of friction between the two. His parents were divorced and his mother was too afraid of him to have him during the days she had custody. His father would move him frequently from school to school once his behavior got so bad that the school started the process to get him into psychiatric care. I had a student while I was doing my student teaching, 8th grade. He was constantly in trouble, but during the times he was in class, he just stared off with the most vacant look in his eyes. It truly scared me. It was downright creepy. One day he was up at the whiteboard writing some stuff. I think it was correcting sentences, with a bunch of other kids who were doing the same thing. I wasn't watching the kids at the board, and all of a sudden I hear this blood-curdling scream and look over. He had brought a hypodermic needle and had stabbed the girl next to him in the leg. He had been holding it in his hand the entire time, just waiting for the opportunity to stick someone. It was, of course, terrible, but the girl turned out okay. The worst part, besides that, was how he laughed when security came to get him. I'm shuddering now just thinking about it. Not a teacher, but at my kid's daycare there was a bona fide sociopath in the making. This kid would inflict harm on others with a genuine smile on his face like he was playing, but he was secretly enjoying it. Hitting, biting, punching, kicking, breaking toys, destroying artwork, but very secretive and carefully planned when teachers or parents weren't looking. He was really intelligent and well spoken for his age as well. Yeah, he was asked to leave after a few years and pretty much every parent there was relieved. To be fair, most kids at that age are sociopaths by definition. They are still learning that other people are also capable of thinking and feeling as deeply as they do. I work in a preschool right now, and we have a little boy in my class who is problematic. We ended up having a conversation with his parents about what we could do to prevent him from repeatedly hitting himself in the head, injuring other children, breaking toys, and generally being disruptive. It's been a long process, but he's finally recognizing that there are consistent consequences for his actions, and that his mom and the teachers do talk about his behavior. His immediate reaction to being told no is no longer running off and banging his head on the wall. He'll try to reason it out with you. The only place where he's still struggling is when he falls down or runs into things. He'll find the closest kid and hit them, or pinch them, or punch them. I used to describe him as having poor impulse control. If it popped into his head he would do it. Now he's more in control of himself and only lacks the control when he is hurt or very angry. Ultimately, if your child is in preschool or daycare, they are probably little sociopaths. Not to seem rude, but they've only recently learned about object permanence. Obviously they are still learning about everything and everyone. It stands to reason that they may think they are one of the only real people around. As they grow, the amount of people who they view as real grows as well. I taught a 4-year-old boy who actually scared me because I fear what his future will be. I can see him ended up doing some awful things to people. He would try and kiss and hug girls, and when they didn't want to, he'd hold them tightly and try to anyway, even if they loudly protested. I explained that there is no kissing in school, and if someone doesn't want to hug, they absolutely do not have to. I also said that some people don't like hugging. He said, well, I want her to, so she will. He just couldn't understand boundaries of any kind. This is just one tiny example of the things he did. I did refer him, as I believe he has autism and he's undergoing assessment now and awaiting a diagnosis, but I worry there's something else there with him. He would also watch other children to see how he should act. For example, a child might be sad and another child comforts them. He would copy this behavior but totally exaggerate it, like completely over the top, and use it as an excuse to touch others, mainly girls. He never showed any emotion other than anger and jealousy. He had a very scary look in his eyes and I've never met another child like him. I was often substituting a special needs class. 6-7 boys about 8-10 years old. The days were normally lively but I always had everything under control and the boys had learned to trust me and at least tried to do what I told them to. Never had any real problems. Just normal stuff. Then one time there was a new boy in the class. Their teacher had written me a note that said to keep a close eye on him at all times. He had the telltale features of a fast child and small, black eyes like a shark. He never showed any emotion whatsoever, excluding immense excitement if someone else got hurt in any way. Few days passed without any incidents and then, out of the blue, he stands up in the middle of class, yanks the much smaller guy sitting in front of him down with his chair from behind and starts to pummel him in the face with his fists. I ran to intervene and grabbed him off and set him in a corner, ordering one of the trustworthy boys to run and get the principal here. Now, the attacker stood in the corner, emotionless as ever and completely calm. I turned to check out the crying kid on the floor and miraculously he seemed unharmed but was just shaken by the surprise attack. I sat down on the floor to calm him down and to help him up. Next thing I know is the shark eye kid standing beside me and stabbing me on the leg with my teacher scissors, the only pointy ones in the classroom. It was then when I realized why the attacked kid wasn't badly hurt. Shark eye was big for his age but he had no physical strength at all. I didn't even get a bruise from his stab. My trusty Lee's jeans stopped the blade, which I instantly took from him. I threw the scissors on top of a high shelf and ordered everyone else out of the classroom to wait for the principal's arrival while I watched over Shark Eye. Boys ran out. Shark Eye looked at me curiously for a few seconds and sat down at his desk and continued his math assignment like nothing had happened. I asked him quite sternly what had made him attack a fellow student. Shark Eye lifted his empty gaze and said, "I heard him laughing at the school cafeteria. I thought he could have been laughing at me. Laurendale, can we play football today in PE class?" The boy had no empathy nor remorse. The episode meant absolutely nothing to him. When the principal arrived, we went through the situation and the class affirmed my description or events as they had happened. Shark Eye's mom picked him up early and he stayed at home for a few days. The principal told me that this was not the first such incident and that the boy was on cue for a hospital school class. The principal commended me for my actions. I was very young at the time, and was surprised that I had been able to keep my cool even after getting stabbed, even if the attempt had been pitiful. Turned out that's my teacher superpower. I never lose it, even when I've been spit at, got chairs thrown at me, someone trying to gouge my eyes out while holding them, more than once, etc. Luckily the years in the same school have accumulated my reputation and nowadays it's very rare that someone even dares to try to mess with me. This incident was nearly 20 years ago but I'll never forget it. Not a teacher, but I only remember the story because I had witnessed the fallout. In 11th grade, there was a girl, let's call her Carol, who was crazy about the cartoon Sonic the Hedgehog, to the point where a teacher threatened to fail her on a writing assignment if she turned in yet another Sonic fanfiction. Instead of actually doing work properly, she handed in an angry letter to the teacher as her assignment. Can't remember what the specifics of that letter were, but I do remember it was such that she got suspended for the remainder of the year. When she came back in grade 12, she had to apologize to everyone in her homeroom for her actions the previous year. It's in this apology that she tells us she had a brain tumor the size of Quebec. The kid from Quebec, naturally, yells at her for comparing Quebec to a brain tumor.